There is a constant need to enlighten people about the great individuals of the 20th century. Mark Rothko was one of those individuals. To be in the presence of a Rothko painting is much more than standing and admiring the picture. The event is an experience in itself. The outcome of that experience depends upon the person. They range from intense, moving, and even to the mystified. Rothko's masterpieces can be classified as expressionism. The paintings that he produces in the last 20 years of his life are some of the most extraordinary, identifiable images of the 20th century. There is no hesitation about Mark Rothko's genius, nor his greatness, and his craft to craft something intense and expressive. He was, to the end of his life, unbending and fearless in his belief and search for expressionism. His life began in Russia, and he came to America as an immigrant. Rothko's heritage consisted of European traditions and American traditions. His work stands to this very day as some of the most powerful but yet troubled pictures ever painted on the canvas. Mark Rothko's career as a painter ranged over 5 decades. The people around the world only knew Rothko with some regard, but not as nearly as they should have. This was no doubt the beginning of something new to the art world as they knew it. The problem during that time era was that there were so many great minds and not enough ways to express oneself. His work was a brilliant testament of the true, supreme artist who produced a new and emotional form of abstract painting. Nonetheless, Rothko would have hoped it was more than that to the people who observed it. He might have hoped that those who came to see his work might have an encounter or feel it close to like a religious experience. There is no denying that his work is unusually powerful. While looking at the work, you are forced to confront yourself. He has the ability to make you experience a feeling you can't quite explain or comprehend. Many people witnessing his work describe the feelings that are emotional but yet agonizing at the same time. There's a saying, many great minds and not enough time. He was truly an example of that. Rothko was a man with many great ideas, and he attempted to express most of those on the canvas. What is definite is that Rothko was one of the few unsurpassed artists of his time. His influences were vast, and he influenced to extend to composers and to painters, and as well as musicians. Rothko began to get tired of trying to explain what he defined in his work as essentially emotional or non-verbal experience. Columnists and public equally agree to this day how far he succeeded in his quest to symbolize this. Not only was there a problem for the common people, but also for the upcoming and aspiring artists of his time. Despite all of his challenges, Rothko would find fortune and fame after World War II. He enrolled in the new school of design. Rothko's tutors included Gorky and Max Weber, great thinkers and philosophers. Rothko's family had his own showing in 1928, finally made it. And less than a year later, he was teaching classes of his own in sculpting and painting. I'm sure you can see that Rothko's life was something much more interesting than your typical modern-day artist. Rothko was a great intellectual and debater. Although he wrote from time to time, he never completed his book on theories that linked to modernism. Rothko's work developed, and he began to integrate classical myths and symbolism into a very rare art form. This consisted of bright abstract colors and shapes. The odd thing about Rothko's work is that he didn't use the typical landscape like human figures to make his art. The splashes of paint and shapes took on a life form all on his own. For 7 years, he painted in oils on enormous canvases. These tend to have the effect of observing the viewer into it, providing a feeling of intimacy, almost as if you're becoming one with the painting. You can see that it isn't difficult to understand Rothko was with his need to be different. I believe we all seek within ourselves to find something in life that completes us. Whether it's painting or writing a book, we all need to feel that satisfaction in life. But like in most cases, fame has its toll, and as it did with Rothko, his friends began to look at him differently, with the newfound success that he had. This caused him to retreat into seclusion to get away from everybody. When over a 6-year period, he produced an incredible 14 paintings. They were said to be the best out of his entire career. These paintings were ironically hung in a Rothko chapel located in Houston, which is a fitting place to experience the works of this genius. Rothko died in 1970 from suicide. The pressure of life can break someone, and sadly it took Rothko's life, a very bright light which this world needed and still needs more of, the very same creators and thinkers as he was. One who was not afraid of stepping outside the line and what people decide as normal or acceptable in society. Rothko looked at the world through eyes that did not see things as others did. So each work was different and a surprise to the viewer. Not for him for his own faith or originality, not for him what the other artists did. His canvases were hung in extraordinarily large masterpieces. With this painting, he lifted the lid on his beliefs and geniuses as he painted. Not for him the fuss of commercialism, but rather he stood apart, interested only in what he saw. His art is a treasure, and he felt left behind, a message to be interpreted by mankind. Rothko was a great man with an endless amount of talent. There are very few that have measured up to his degree of talent. Much more can be learned by observing a man than trying to imitate him. Rothko was literally a walking masterpiece. And the more you learn about him, the greater you begin to understand the craft he blessed this world with, and cherish the beauty of art in general. Thank you, and have a good night.